Truckee Meadows Community College Jazz Survey, lecture number 3. All right, so one of the things that I wanted to remember to talk about is that the history of jazz and therefore the study of the survey of jazz, it's not very linear. Although there is a timeline, the development of the different styles and the different influence isn't exactly linear. It's much more like a fabric than a line. Things are influenced both across time and contemporaneously. And there's a lot of different styles going on at the same time throughout the history of jazz, and different people are being influenced by different lineages throughout the history of jazz. Where we've gotten to so far is a bit of a discussion about what the origins of jazz are, the particular social influences that shaped New Orleans, and the gumbo of influences that went into the making of early jazz. Go on now, buddy. Go on. Go lay down. So we discussed European dance music a little bit. We discussed the fact that there was a lot of freed people of color mixing with whites, mixing with Creoles, and there was a greater degree of social integration in New Orleans on account of its Spanish history mixed with the Caribbean culture. We talked about Catholic and Caribbean parade culture and funeral dirges and second lines. We talked about brothels a little bit, and the piano players, especially Jelly Roll Morton and some of the other early piano players. We talked about street music, Buddy Bolden and King Oliver, and the outgrowth of the municipal marching bands and that kind of stuff. So all this is going on at the same time. So one of the things we're going to talk about today is a little bit of music theory to give you some idea of how people improvise and what the different methods of improvisation are. And I am going to start a little bit of a discussion of the blues, which is a fairly complicated subject, and you could have a whole class just devoted to it. But it is definitely one of the key ingredients in early jazz. So that said, we are going to dive into our music theory portion. All right, so you're not expected to become musicians and necessarily have a functional player's knowledge of this information, but this information does give you a clearer idea of how jazz and music in general, but especially jazz, is put together. So at this point, I'm going to come and get the camera, and we're going to move over to the keyboard, and we are going to learn the names of the notes on the piano, on any keyboard actually. So as we look at the keyboard, we see that all up and down it, there are groups of 3 black notes and groups of 2. Groups of 3 and groups of 2. So here's a group of 3, here's a group of 2, here's a group of 3, here's a group of 2, group of 3, group of 2, so on and so forth. Doesn't matter what keyboard we look at. Here's my synthesizer keyboard, group of 3, group of 2, all over the world. All right, so in between the middle and right hand black notes of a group of 3, that white note is A. So here's a group of 3, here's the middle and right hand one, here's A. Here's a group of 3, here's a middle and right hand one, here's A. Group of 3, middle and right hand one, A. So as we look away, here's A, A, A. So now we count up the white notes from A. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Then we're back to being in between the middle and right hand one of a group of 3 black notes, so we're back to A. Once again, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. So just like A is in between the middle and right hand one, all the white notes are wherever they are relative to the group of 3 and black notes. So sharp means the next note up. It doesn't matter if it's black or white. Here's a group of 3, here's A. Here's A sharp, the next one up. Here's B. Here's B sharp. So B sharp is the same as A, B, C, because it's a white note. B sharp, the next one up is C. C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, E sharp, which is the same as F because there's no black note there. F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A. So if someone said, what note is that? You'd go, group of three, here's our A, B, C, C sharp. So flat means the next note down. Once again, it doesn't matter if it's black or white. So here's a group of three, here's my A flat, G, G flat, F, F flat. So F flat's the same as E, E flat, D, D flat, C, C flat, which is the same as B, B flat, and you're back to A. So B sharp is the same as C, C flat's the same as B. E sharp is the same as F, F flat is the same as E. So in between the group of three and is A, you count up the white notes, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Sharp is the next one up. It doesn't matter if it's black or white. Flat is the next one down, whether it's black or white. That's all over the world, any keyboard. All right, the next little piece of information we're going to learn is the names of two different distances between notes. And the first distance we're going to learn is a half step. We call a distance in music an interval. So the first interval we're going to learn is a half step. Here's A. A half step is the next note. It doesn't matter if it's black or white. The next one is a half step. So here's A. A sharp is a half step. From A sharp to B is a half step. From B to C is a half step. So if it's the next note, doesn't matter if it's black or white, that's a half step. It's a whole step if you skip one and only one note. In other words, two half steps. So if I skip one and only one, it's two half steps, and we call that a whole step. So here's a whole step. It doesn't matter if it's black or white. B to C sharp is a whole step because there's the C in between. C sharp to D sharp is a whole step because there's one in between. So if there's not one in between, it's a half step, and if there's one and only one in between, it's called a whole step. To make a major scale, which is one of the scales that we use all the time in music, the recipe for making a major scale is this. We start on a note, and this time I'm going to start on A again. And from that note we go whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, half step. So you start on a note, and from the note you go whole step, half step, whole step, half step. So it's two whole steps and a half step, three whole steps and a half step. Doesn't matter what note I start on. If I start on C, there I am on C. Now I'm going to go whole step, half step, whole step, half step. And your ear already knows this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. That's the familiar scale that makes up a lot of Western music. So you can play all kinds of melodies just out of the notes of that scale. So the scale is essentially a selection of 7 notes out of the 12 available notes. And the recipe for generating that is you start on a note, and that's the key you're in, and you go whole step, half step, whole step, half step. That's how you make the major scale. And that's one of the fundamental tools for improvisation. So let me illustrate something here. I hope I can hold the camera still while I do this well enough. All right, so let's take a really simple melody like Oh When the Saints. So I'm going to play it in the key of C. Here's my scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The melody goes like this. 1, 3, 4, 5. 1, 3, 4, 5. 1, 3, 4, 5, 3. 1, 3, 2. Just that much. 1, 3, 4, 5. 1, 3, 4, 5. 1, 3, 4, 5, 3. 1, 3, 2. Oh, when the saints, oh, when the saints, oh, when the saints go marching in. Now, if I want to improvise on that, one of the ways that I could improvise on that is by just adding more notes that are in the scale. I'm still playing only notes from within the scale. Now I could start to improvise by adding notes that are not in the scale. See, I'm adding the two there. I added the two that were not in the scale, the two black notes. So that's some of the tools of improvisation. And I did write a fairly nice, concise series of notes that explain this in the Canvas as notes for lecture 3. All right, so hope you don't get dizzy from the camera moves. So besides the major scale, one of the ways that we introduce some of the improvisatory techniques are, instead of just using the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, we might add the one in between 2 and 3. 1, 2, 3, and the one in between 4 and 5, and the one in between 6 and 7. So if you emphasize those, that's where you get the blues scale. So the blues scale is also one of the key elements in improvisation. So that's supposed to be my tie-in to the next part of the lecture, which is the blues as a set of forms and a set of styles that were huge contributors to early jazz and to the formation of jazz. So a little bit about the blues. The blues is a complicated set of different styles, but it is definitely an African-American form that started in the southern United States and has elements that are also carried over from especially West African music and Malian music in particular. There's an instrument called the kora that is a harp-like instrument, and it's some of the earliest examples that we have of blues scales and blues style improvisation, even though they weren't yet what you would call blues forms. So that combined with field hollers, which were literally means of communication and means of entertainment and means of coded language in the fields when slaves were working, they would holler back and forth. And some of that was songs and entertainment, and some of it was information, and some of it was just stylized ways of making the time go by. So I am certainly no expert on field hollers, but I've heard a bunch of different field recordings of that. One of the things that you could look up if you're interested in, is really not part of the Jazz Survey thing, but look up Alan Lomax and then listen to some of his field recordings. He was a gentleman that went down into the southern United States with early recording equipment in the 20s and 30s and 40s and recorded all kinds of different styles of music. Alan Lomax. Anyway, back to blues forms. So one of the influences was church music. One of the influences in blues was field hollers. One of the influences in blues, of course, was the street music and the piano players. But among other influences, there were guitar players. And so those were the main styles of things that were going on in the blues. Now, one of the main blues forms that we're going to learn about is the 12-bar blues form. And the 12-bar blues form is made up of 3 4-measure phrases, and each of those 4-measure phrases is divided in half with a call and response. So sometimes the call is the vocal and the response is instrumental, or sometimes it's just a wait and a hold. Anyway, 3 4-bar phrases, and usually the first 2 repeat and the last one forms a rhyming couplet. So, every day I have the blues. There's the first phrase, and the wait. Every day I have the blues. There's the wait. Third phrase. In trouble, baby, you I hate to lose. So, in time. same form. 3 4-bar phrases. Call and answer on each one. So let's see here. I'm going to Kansas City. Kansas City, here I come. There's the answer. Second phrase. Going to Kansas City. Kansas City, here I come. Crazy kind of loving me. I want to get me some. So the first phrase is a repeat. The second phrase is a repeat of the first phrase, and the last phrase is the couplet. Standing on the corner, 12th Street and Vine. Standing on the corner, 12th Street and Vine, Kansas City baby and my bottle of Kansas City wine. So AAB is the lyric format, and so it only takes one rhyme to make one of these forms. So the first 2 lines are repeated, and the last one is the rhyming couplet. That's the standard 12-bar blues form. So this became used in all kinds of different styles. It's probably one of the most pervasive musical forms in the world, period. It was one of the greatest cultural contributions that the United States ever made to world music. And so I was talking about scales and chords, and one of the things that, hang on, I'll be right back. One of the things that we're going to get to now is the same concept, except on guitar as opposed to on piano. And I'll show you a couple of the basic blues styles that evolved very early in the evolution of the blues. And all of this is it's not exactly chronologically linear, like I was saying before. So one of the styles that evolved very early was what they call a Piedmont style. This was not as much of a New Orleans style as much as a Carolinas and slightly more north, but still in the southern United States. So this involved finger picking a guitar in standard tuning being the regular Spanish style guitar tuning, and as opposed to tuning it to an open chord. So, and a lot of it involved finger picking, and especially the alternate, what we call the alternate thumb picking. And the alternate thumb picking was a variation on the ragtime piano feel. Remember the left hand of the ragtime going back and forth between the bass line, which was meant to imitate the tuba in marching, boom, 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 mixed with the chord. So that's the basic ragtime stride left hand. So they applied that to guitar. See how the thumb goes back and forth, just like the left hand on the piano? So a lot of that has to do with picking the thumb alternate pattern and then adding in the fingers in between or with it. But faster than that usually. So that's some examples of Piedmont style blues. One of the people that we'll get to listen to a little bit later is Mississippi John Hurts, and he's one of the wonderful purveyors of this kind of music. The other thing with that style of picking is that once it got applied to other kinds of music, all kinds of pop music to this day employs those picking styles. Lots of current singer-songwriter music and even current country music employs those techniques. So a lot of times now it's not done to those simple chords, but it's done to jazzier chords, but it's still the same kind of techniques. So, by way of a quick recap of what we've talked about today, we've talked about how the history of jazz is not at all linear, and even though there is a chronological lineage to it, and we're going to, in a broad way, see eras and styles, individual styles and regional styles are often much more complicated than that, and it's much more like a cloth than a rope. Leads from one thing to the next. A lot of things are going on at the same time. So then we talked about how you make a major scale, how you identify the notes on the keyboard, and the sound of the major scale as opposed to the sound of the blues scale, and mixing them, and how that's one of the elements in jazz improvisation. We've talked about how so now we've added a little bit more information about one of the key ingredients in early jazz, which is blues, and we'll get farther into that as we go on. But I've also put up notes about the parameters for analyzing some of this music. And one of the things that's key to analyzing blues and the early jazz is that this was not concert music. This was music that you might hear outdoors, you might hear it in a bar, you might hear it in a whorehouse, but you weren't going to hear it in a concert hall. You might even hear it on the streets. But this was not music that was recognized academically. It wasn't even music that was recognized commercially. And it was basically the social underworld that was purveying and enjoying and developing these musical styles. All right. Thank you. We'll see you next time.